close your eyes and imagine yourself standing at the foot of a towering medieval castle. The stones are cold, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and wood froth from the outside. It looks like a fortress of safety, a stronghold of kings and knights. But step inside, and you'll discover a world of hidden dangers, discomfort, and daily struggles that made life in a castle far from the fairy tale we imagine. Tonight, we'll explore why medieval castles were, in many ways, death, traps, and what it was really like to live, work, and survive within their walls. So settle in and let your mind drift back to the Middle Ages.
Daily life immersion. Why you wouldn't last a day in a medieval castle. 1. The cold that never left. A life of constant chill let your mind drift back. To a time before central heating, before insulated walls, to an era where cold was not just a season, but a way of life. Picture yourself waking in the dim light of dawn, your breath forming pale clouds in the air before you. The castle's stone walls, built to withstand sieges, were merciless in their inability to retain warmth. Even in summer, a perpetual dampness clung to the corridors, seeping into your bones like an unwelcome guest that refused to leave. The noble family might have had tapestries lining their chambers, thick furs draped over their beds, and roaring fires tended through the night. But for the servants, the guards, the cooks, those who kept the castle running, their nights were spent huddled under thin woolen blankets, straw mattresses offering little cushion against the hard pallets beneath. Frost crept across the floor in winter, forming delicate patterns like nature's cruel decoration. And if you were stationed in the watchtower, the wind howled through the arrow slits, biting at exposed skin until your fingers grew numb around your spear. There was no escaping it. The cold dictated your movements, rushing through chores to keep blood flowing, rubbing hands together over feeble candle flames, stealing warmth from the kitchen ovens whenever possible. And when illness came, as it always did, the cold made it worse. Coughs lingered for months. Joints ached with a stiffness that never fully faded. This was not the romanticized chill of a winter's tale. This was a cold that wore you down day after day until it became part of you. The smell, an unavoidable assault on the senses. Now, take a slow breath in and prepare yourself. Because if the cold was a constant companion, the smell of the castle was an ever-present intruder. There was no escaping it, no corner, untouched by the mingling scents of sweat, smoke, and stagnation. The great hall, where feasts were held, carried the lingering aroma of roasted meats and spilled ale butt beneath that, the sour temps of old rushes. These floor coverings, changed only a few times a year, held generations of crumbs, vomit, and worse. Servants sprinkled herbs to mask the odor, but it was a losing battle. The latrine's garderobes emptied directly into the moat or a cesspit below, meaning that on warm days, a foul miasma rose up through the castle's very stones. Then there was the smell of people. Bathing was rare, perhaps once a month, if you were fortunate. Nobles doused themselves in rosewater or lavender, but the common folk? Their scent was a mix of wood smoke, animal hides, and the metallic tang of hard labor. The blacksmith's forge added its own layer-burning charcoal and hot iron. The stables, just inside the walls, contributed the musk of horses and manure. And in the kitchens, the greasy odor of tallow candles made from animal fat mixed with the scent of bread, baking and stew simmering, but perhaps the worst smell of all was the one you couldn't place at first, until you realized it was death. Not the sudden, violent scent of battle, but the slow, creeping odor of decay mold in the damp corners, rats decaying behind walls. The inevitable sickness that clung to the air during outbreaks of disease. This was not a place of perfumed luxury. It was a fortress where every breath reminded you of life's fragility. 3. The sounds, a never-ending chorus of discomfort. Close your eyes and listen. The castle was never silent. Even at night, when torches burned low and most souls were asleep, the stones themselves seemed to whisper. The wind, whistling through arrow slits, created an eerie, almost mournful tune. the occasional scuttle of a rat in the rushes, the distant cough of a guard on duty trying to stifle the sound so as not to wake others. By day, the sounds multiplied. The rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer shaping swords and horseshoes, the shouts of children pages and servants in training chasing each other through the courtyards, the creak of the well's pulley as water was drawn, bucket after bucket for cooking, cleaning, and drinking. And beneath it all, the low murmur of gossip servants whispering about the Lord's latest temper, guards exchanging rumors of bandits in the woods. But the most dreaded sound? The tolling of the castle bell in the dead of night. It could mean only one thing: an attack, a fire or worse. In an instant, the uneasy peace shattered. Soldiers scrambled for their weapons, servants rushed to secure food stores, children were herded into the deepest chambers, and all the while, the bell's relentless pealing echoed off the walls, sound that could turn even the bravest stomach to ice. This was the soundtrack of castle life, not the grand fanfares of tournaments or the minstrel-esque songs of legend, but the unending, unyielding noise of survival. For the labor, backbreaking, never-ending toil. If you were not born to nobility, your life in the castle was defined by one thing: labor. Servants rose before dawn, their day beginning in darkness. The kitchen staff stoked the fires, kneaded dough for bread, and hauled water from the well up narrow. Twisting staircases designed to confuse invaders, but which also made every chore twice as hard. The laundresses scrubbed linens in icy water, their hands red and cracked from lye soap. The stable boys mucked out stalls, their backs aching from the weight of hay bales. Even the soldiers, those not currently on watch, were not idle. They trained for hours in the yard, swinging blunted swords until their arms burned. They repaired armor, sharpened blades, and stood guard in all weather. A single moment of inattention could mean a slipped knife, a broken bone, or worse. And then there were the tasks no one spoke of. The disposal of waste, the clearing of corpses after illness struck, the silent, grim work of preparing the dead for burial. There was no glory in this labor, only the quiet understanding that if you did not do it, the castle would crumble. This was the truth of castle life. It's not the grand feasts or the glittering armor, but the endless, grinding work that kept the walls standing. The biography, the cunning ruler who outwitted death won. A birth shrouded in omens. Let us turn our attention now to a figure who defied the castle's cruelty, not through brute strength, but through wit. Her name, Eleanor de Montfort. Born not under a lucky star, but beneath a blood-red moon. The chronicles tell us that on the night of Eleanor's birth, a storm raged so fiercely it toppled the chapel's cross. The midwives whispered of ill omens. Her father, a battle-hardened baron, saw only weakness in his daughter, a girl who coughed too much, who preferred books to swords. But Eleanor listened. She absorbed every murmured conversation, every hissed secret between servants. By age 10, she could recite every noble alliance in the region and every grudge. When the plague took her brothers, leaving her father with no male heir, the old baron roared in grief. "A woman cannot hold these lands," he declared. But Eleanor, now 14, merely dipped her head in false submission and began to plot. 2. The Silent Rebellion. A castle is a web of alliances, and Eleanor learned to spin her own threads. She befriended the steward, slipping him extra wine to loosen his tongue. She memorized the guards' rotation schedules. She even coaxed the castle's ancient herbalist, a woman most feared as a witch, to teach her which poisons left no trace. When her father arranged her marriage to a brutish northern lord, Eleanor did not weep. She smiled and sent a letter. The ink was laced with a subtle toxin one that caused a slow, painless decline. By the time her betrothed arrived to claim her, he was too weak to stand. A tragic illness, the physicians declared. Eleanor, now 18, knelt dutifully at her father's side as he cursed the heavens for his misfortunes. Within a year, her father followed his sons to the grave. Some said grief broke him. Others noted how his wine had tasted oddly sweet in his final days. The barony passed to Eleanor. 3. The Reign of Quiet Terror. A woman ruling a castle should have been a brief anomaly. But Eleanor understood power better than any knight. She doubled the servants' wages, ensuring their loyalty. She hosted lavish feasts for neighboring lords, while discreetly funding bandits to harass their lands. When a rival accused her of witchcraft, she invited him to Dinant, served him the same dish her father had loved in his final weeks. Her greatest weapon? Patience. While men rushed to war, Eleanor played the long game. She let enemies underestimate her, the sickly girl who coughed into her sleeve. She married a second time to a scholar who adored her, conveniently died childless, leaving her even richer. By 30, she controlled 3 castles. By 40, she had outlived every enemy who once mocked her. Yet for all her cunning, Eleanor was not cruel. She banned the torture of prisoners. She founded a hospital within her castle walls. And when the peasant revolt came, she negotiated not with swords, but with grain stores and promises. Fear keeps them obedient, she wrote in her diary. Fed men rebel less. 4. The final trick, Eleanor de Montfort died at 62 for her time. The official record claims she passed peacefully in her sleep. But those who knew her smirked at the notion. Her final act, a sealed letter, delivered to her heir only after her burial. Inside, a list of every noble who had plotted against her, and precise instructions for their ruin. The castle still stands today. Guides speak of Eleanor as a wise ruler. They do not mention the herbalist's ledger, discovered centuries later with coded entries for special tonics. They do not explain why her portrait, the only one she ever permitted, shows her holding a rose, its petals edged in faintest gold, the same shade as the poison that felled her first betrothed. Sleep now and wonder. How many other secrets those old stones still keep? The mystery, the castle's hidden bones, lost passages, and buried secrets. 1. The architect's vanishing blueprint asterisk castles were never just fortresses. They were labyrinths of deception. And perhaps no deception was greater than the one woven by Master Baldwin, the 13th century architect who designed Chateau de Brissac. His plans, meticulously drawn on vellum, showed a standard keep-thick walls, a central hall, predictable defenses. But when laborers finished construction in 1247, Baldwin disappeared, and with him, the true blueprint. Asterisk for centuries, the castle stood as Baldwin's final work. Then, 1982, a librarian in Toulouse stumbled upon a crumbling ledger. Its pages contained frantic notes from the castle's steward. The mason insists there are passages unmarked. The Lord must not know. Further down, single chilling line. Baldwin's price was silence. Modern scans revealed the truth. A honeycomb of tunnels beneath the wine cellar. Some led to escape routes. Others terminated abruptly at blank walls. And one just wide enough for a single person ended at a vertical shaft descending into darkness. No ladder, no explanation. Just Baldwin's last joke, or warning. 2. The chapel that should not exist in 2008, restorers at Castle Hermannsdorf found something impossible. Behind the chapel's altar, their thermal camera detected a void. When they chiseled through the plaster, they uncovered a second chapel. Identical in size, but older its frescoes depicting not saints, but horned figures dancing around a black sun. Carbon dating placed it at 1188, a decades before the official chapel was built, yet no records mentioned it. Even stranger, the original floor had been hastily covered with lead sheets, as if sealing something in. When archaeologists lifted one corner, their Geiger counters spiked. Lead wasn't for moisture, it was for radiation. Castle's archives provided no answers. But a marginal note in a monk's diary from 1191 reads, Lord Gottfried commanded the masons to build over it. He said the dark mass must never see day again. To this day, no one knows what dark mass lay beneath those stones, or why it still emits faint alpha particles after 800 years. 3. The Ghost Regiment's last stand. Some secrets aren't buried, they're remembered too well. In 1346, during the siege of Calmont Castle, chronicles speak of a phantom garrison, 200 soldiers who appeared at dawn to reinforce the walls, then vanished by noon. The attackers swore. These men bore no colors, spoke no words, and left no footprints in the mud. Asterisk for centuries, historians dismissed it as battle fatigue. Then, in 2017, ground-penetrating radar revealed a mass grave beneath the castle's training yard. The skeletons wore no armor, but each skull bore identical fractures not from weapons, but from a crushing force, like being struck by a falling portcullis. Strangest of all, radiocarbon dating placed their deaths at 1346. Asterisk. Perhaps they were prisoners, forced into a suicide defense. Perhaps something darker occurred that morning. The castle's ledger from that year is missing 3 crucial pages. The edges that remain show singe marks, as if someone held them over a flame to erase what was written. 4. The librarian's final entry. Not all mysteries are violent. Some are simply waiting. In 1999, during renovations at Warkworth Castle, workers found a small iron box behind a loosened stone. Inside lay a single vellum page, its ink still shockingly black after 500 years. It read, "I, Brother Aldrich, have hidden the true chronicle where only the innocent may find it. Seek the chamber that breathes." Asterisk. For 20 years, historians searched. Then, in 2019, a 9-year-old tourist on a school trip pressed her ear to the dungeon wall and heard it. A faint, rhythmic hisser moving through a shaft no wider than a finger. Behind that wall, tiny room, empty save for a child-sized skeleton curled around a book. The pages crumbled at touch, except for one. A map of the castle, with a single phrase repeated in the margins. Asterisk, he promised we could leave. The castle's records show no missing children, no plague outbreaks, just an entry from 1523. The whispering in the walls has ceased, thanks be to God. Sleep now, and listen closely. Sometimes the stones still speak. The elite's illusion. How nobles turned death traps into playgrounds won. The Lord's mourning. Rituals of delusion, while servants shivered awake before dawn. The lord of the castle slept until the sun painted his stained glass, windows gold. His rising was a ceremony in itself, attended by no fewer than 6 people. A squire warmed his linen undershirt by the fire before touching it to his skin. A page poured rosewater over his hands to purify them from sleep's corruption. His chamberlain would then present the day's first lie. "The castle is secure, my lord." Breakfast was an exercise in denial. Honeyed figs from Sicily? Wine diluted with snow from the Alps? The lord dined on pewter plates, blissfully unaware that the lead in the glaze was slowly poisoning him. His greatest concern? Whether the peacocks served at last night's feast had been sufficiently gilded. Meanwhile, in the courtyard below, a scullery maid scrubbed blood from the butcher's block. The lord never saw it. His windows faced east toward the sunrise, never the slaughter. 2. The ladies' chamber, a gilded cage for noble women. Luxury was equally suffocating. The countess's mourning began with her ladies lacing her into a gown so tight she could neither bend nor breathe deeply. Her cosmetics, concocted from mercury and vinegars, lowly aided her complexion, even as they preserved it. The castle's drafts were blamed for her cough, never the white lead in her powder. Her chief distraction was an ivory spindle for spinning thread she'd never use, a psalter she pretended to read, and always the weight of the keys at her belt, symbols of domestic power over pantries she never entered. Cellars she feared, and chests holding her own dowry, which she couldn't spend without her lord's permission. But the greatest illusion, she was free from the castle's filth. When sewage backed up into the lower halls, her carpets were sprinkled with dried lavender. When plague struck, she retreated to her solar, a room renamed for the sun it rarely saw. Its windows shuddered against miasma. Her wealth didn't spare her from the castle's threats. It just perfumed them. 3. The banquet. Performance over sustenance at high table. Reality was banished with each course. Peacocks roasted and refeathered to look alive. Pies bursting with live birds. Wine flowed purple as blood and was just as likely to kill. Laced with lead and sweetened with corpse-preserving honey. Attainment was equally grotesque. Dwarves tossed in blankets for laughter. Bears forced to dance on scorching plates. Between courses, the lord's fool would mock the starving peasants outside, while the lord himself tossed bones to his dogs. Unaware that the puppies under the table were actually hairless children pages paid to crawl on all fours as part of the jest. Yet even this feast depended on the castle's invisible workforce. The turnspit dog running in its wheel to roast the meat, the blind musician playing in the minstrel's gallery, and in the shadows, the cupbearer role given to the Lord's least favorite nephew. Since tasting wine for poison was a privilege reserved for expendable relatives. 4. The night. Luxury's dark underbelly after sunset. The nobles retreated to chambers just as perilous as the servants' quarters. They simply didn't know it. Canopied beds hid moldering tapestries crawling with lice. Sweet-smelling rushes covered floors slick with rotting food, and the Lord's prized security measure. A heavy iron bar across his door would trap him inside if fire broke out. Their greatest fear? Not assassins, but boredom. So they played chess with pieces carved from executed criminals' bones. They bet on which prisoner would survive the dungeon longest. And when even these diversions paled, they summoned the castle's resident hermita, paid recluse, who lived in a forewind in the garden, contractually obligated to be wise on demand. As the Lord drifted off, swaddled in furs and arrogance, he never heard the servant coughing in the stairwell. Never wondered why his wine tasted faintly of almonds. Never noticed his favorite hound pawing at the loose floorstone where the architect's secret passage began. The castle's dangers didn't vanish for the elite. They simply became part of the game. Sleep now, modern listener. Your bed has no poison, no spies, no loose stones. Let the nobles keep their illusions. You know the truth? Why you wouldn't last a day on the Roman frontier. Imagine waking up before dawn, not to the sound of birdsong, but to the low creaking of wooden beams overhead, and the muffled clatter of boots in the corridor. Your breath forms pale clouds in the cold air, the kind of damp chill that sinks into the bones and lingers all day. The straw mattress beneath you is coarse, slightly damp, and not your own. It was issued to you when you arrived, one of many. Small, indistinguishable rectangles laid out in the barracks, shoulder to shoulder with men you barely know. You are a Roman auxiliary. It's not Roman by birth, but by allegiance. Perhaps you came from Gaul, or Thrace. Or Syria swept into Rome's machinery in exchange for pay, food, and the promise of land after your service. But here, on the edge of the empire, none of that matters. Here, the walls of the fort are thick and cold. Sky is gray more often than it is blue. The wind cuts sideways across the open training yard, carrying with it the scent of damp earth, burning oil, and something faintly metallic. Iron weapons, perhaps, or blood. Your first task this morning is simple: fetch water. But the well is outside the fortified wall. A short walk past the latrines and along a rutted dirt path worn by hundreds of heavy boots. You carry the same amphora your unit shares. Its surface cracked, its mouth worn smooth by use. The water is icy, and the amphora heavy. You carry it back carefully, teeth chattering, mindful not to spill a drop. There will be no second trip. Breakfast is coarse bread and thin gruel. It is always coarse bread and thin gruel. Once in a while the cook throws in chopped onions or a bit of pork fat. Today, it's just barley and salt. You eat quickly, standing, surrounded by the smell of sweat, wool, and damp leather armor. Then, formation. Training is relentless. Even here, where enemy attacks are rare, the centurion demands drills. It's marching in full gear. Formation practice with shields and short swords, lifting weighted stones, polishing your mail armor until your hands go raw from the sand paste. It is all designed to make you stronger, faster, sharper, but the repetition dulls the mind. Your legs ache. Your arms feel like lead. Still no one complains, because punishment is swift. There is always punishment. The man who broke rank yesterday now stands tied to a post, his hands raw, his back striped from lashes. The centurion does not yell. He speaks quietly, coldly, and the unit watches. Always the unit watches. Rome may be far away, but its discipline lives here. In every ordered motion, every silence, every wound. When the day's drills are done, you're sent to the outer perimeter. Watch duty. Yes. The wind hisses through the tall grass. Beyond the field lies the forest, thick, dark, and silent. Somewhere out there, beyond the border, are the tribes Rome could not tame. Some of them are merchants, others raiders, all of them foreign. You keep your eyes fixed on the tree line, though nothing moves. Still, the stories echo in your mind. Ambushed patrols, severed hands left at the gate, comrades who wandered too far and never returned. You are not allowed to light a fire. Dinner is nearly identical to breakfast. Sometimes you're allowed dried fruit. Once last week, someone claimed to have found a small piece of cheese. You didn't believe him. Tonight it's lentils and more bread. You eat beside a man from Germania who doesn't speak your tongue. You gesture and nod. But that's enough. Later, you wash your feet. Always wash your feet, they told you. Trench rot, mold, infections. The medicus showed you the leg of a man who didn't. You haven't forgotten it. Night falls heavily, cloaking the fort in quiet. The torches flicker, casting long shadows across the stone corridors. You lie on your straw, wrapped in a coarse blanket that smells faintly of mildew. It is not warm. The wind presses against the shutters like a whisper. Outside, something howls. A wolf, perhaps, or something less natural. You close your eyes. You try not to think. You try not to feel the cold. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after that, and the day after that. There are no battles here, no glory, just long gray days, longer nights. Still, you endure, because this is what Rome asks of you, because to survive on the frontier is to disappear. The name was Gaius Avidius Rufus, a Roman of solid pedigree, born not in the backwater provinces but under the warm sun of Italia, a place of villas, libraries, and colonnades. He was educated in the style of all Roman elites, with Greek poetry, Stoic philosophy, and the rules of law echoing through his youth. He wore tunics of soft wool, spoke Latin with practiced precision, and carried himself with the quiet assurance of a man who had never missed a meal. And yet he found himself far from home, not in Rome, not in Capua, but here, on the misty edge of Britannia. He was appointed as governor of one of the northernmost provinces, a territory defined not by marble or order, but by fog, marsh, and wildness. A place where Roman roads turned to mud, and the eagles of the legion stood watch over stone walls and strange tribes. His task was simple on paper: keep the peace, collect taxes, and report to Rome. But paper and reality rarely agreed in these parts. His villa, if one could call it that, had once belonged to a local chieftain. It sat near a bend in the river, protected by wooden palisades and surrounded by cultivated fields that produced just enough to feed the garrison. Its central courtyard was paved with flat stones, uneven in places, and the walls were decorated with modest frescoes, now faded by rain. There were 3 bath slaves, 2 scribes, and 1 physician. And there was Gaius, pacing each evening, wrapped in a cloak, watching the northern skies darken. He rode often to Rome. Reports about grain yields, complaints about late supply caravans, warnings about rumors from the northern tribes, whispers of unity, of revolt, of a strange new leader known only as the Antlered One. Most of his messages went unanswered. Others returned months later, scrawled with brief acknowledgments. Still, Gaius managed. He hosted feasts for local tribal leaders, cautiously cordial affairs where smoked meat and honeyed wine dulled suspicions for a while. He oversaw road repairs, which meant little more than piling gravel onto sinking tracks. He disciplined soldiers for drunkenness and negotiated disputes between settlers and locals over goats, fences, or missing daughters. He wore his toga for public decrees and donned leather for inspection tours. For all this, he was tolerated, even respected, until he disappeared. It was a mild morning in spring. The fields were damp with dew. His villa was quiet, the air filled only with the rustling of linen and the distant rhythm of hoofbeats. He rose, as he always did, before sunrise, took a modest breakfast of dates and cheese, gave his scribes instructions for the day's letters. Then he donned a traveler's cloak and left the gates, accompanied by 2 guards on horseback. He was headed north to negotiate, it was said. A tribal dispute, a meeting arranged under terms of peace. But Gaius Avidius Rufus never returned. The guards were found a week later, both slain, their bodies marked not by weapons of war, but by ritual, bound at the hands, eyes sealed with clay, kind of burial unfamiliar to Roman rites. The governor's horse returned alone. His signet ring was later discovered. Many miles to the east, buried inside a clay jar at the foot of an ancient oak. Why it was placed there remains unknown. Rome, ever pragmatic, sent a replacement 3 months later. There was no investigation, only rumors. Some said he was taken by druids and sacrificed beneath the moon. Others believed he defected, seduced by local mystics and driven mad by strange herbs. A more practical theory claimed a rival Roman, ambitious and unseen, orchestrated his downfall to secure his position, but the truth remains lost, like the man himself. What survives are the letters, brittle scrolls kept in a provincial archive full of warnings no one heeded, signed with a hand that vanished into legend. And so the mist closed once more around the northern villa, and the name of Gaius Avidius Rufus faded into the silence of the frontier. The forgotten bathhouse beneath the hills picture, if you will, a gentle hill. Not grand or dramatic, but rounded and soft, like a sleeping beast beneath the grass. Sheep graze along its slopes. Wind whistles low over the mossy stone walls that thread across the landscape like the ghosts of property lines. It is the sort of hill you might pass without a second glance, and yet, beneath it lies a secret. For hundreds of years, this hill near what is now modern-day Lancashire concealed something remarkable. A Roman bathhouse, intact, buried not by catastrophe, but by time. Forgotten first, and then overtaken by layers of soil, leaf, and root. A silent chamber, hidden just beneath the surface, was only discovered in the early 20th century quite by accident. Workers digging a drainage trench for a nearby farm struck a hollow. Not a cave as they first suspected, but a space crafted by human hands. At first, the farmers thought it was an old storage cellar, but the shape was wrong. The floor was tiled, the air, stale and cool, had the stillness of something sacred. Over the following years, archaeologists arrived. They moved carefully. They peeled away layers of turf and clay with brushes, not shovels. What they found was extraordinary. A domed chamber of stone and brick, capped by a circular oculus that had long since been sealed. Beneath it, 3 rooms emerged: the frigidarium, the tepidarium, and the caldarium, cold, warm, and hot. Each room told a story. The frigidarium was spare and simple. A square pool, now dry, once held rain-chilled water. Visitors would have lowered themselves in slowly, the shock of the cold biting into sun-warmed skin. The walls here were undecorated, save for a single carving, a fish etched with care into one corner. A quiet reminder, perhaps, of Neptune's domain. The tepidarium was the most complete. Its floor was intact, made from small tiles, red, black, and pale yellow. The walls bore faint traces of painted frescoes, flowing red drapery, hints of human figures. Most had faded beyond recognition, like dreams lost upon waking. The room was designed for lingering. Warmed by the hypocaust beneath, the floor gave off a gentle heat. Patrons would lie back on stone benches, sweat slowly beginning to form. Conversation murmuring softly in Latin. Time moved differently in rooms like this. Slower, more forgiving. Then there was the caldarium, the hottest chamber. A brazier once stood at its heart. Bronze pipes, now green with age, would have carried heated air through the floor and walls. A niche in one wall still contained a fragment of statuary, a torso, broken and scorched by time, perhaps once a likeness of a local deity or minor emperor. It is said the steam was so thick in this room that even the outlines of your companions dissolved. There was anonymity in it, a kind of temporary erasure of status, title, and trouble. But what made this bathhouse truly unusual was what lay behind a narrow passage. Concealed for centuries behind a collapsed arch. Beyond the last room, tucked away and accessible only by crawling through fallen stone, was a 4th chamber, not part of the standard Roman design. This chamber was smaller, darker, and not heated. It had no pool, no frescoes, but the floor was covered in offerings. Dozens of oil lamps, most extinguished, some broken. Clay tablets bearing inscriptions, many too worn to decipher, coins from across the empire, Iberian silver, Egyptian bronze, even a denarius from the time of Vespasian. One inscription remained clear. It read simply, "For the safe return of a son." This chamber wasn't a place of cleansing. It was a place of petition. a room of whispered hope. Some archaeologists believe this was a local adaptation, a merging of Roman ritual with native beliefs. Others suggest it was used during a time of crisis, an improvised shrine for soldiers before campaigns, for mothers who waited by cold hearths. The bathhouse, as it turns out, was more than a public utility. It was a place of ritual, of transformation, a place where water, heat, and hope intersected. Over time, as the Roman grip on Britain weakened, the bathhouse fell into disuse. The fuel ran out, the roofs began to sag, water stopped flowing through the lead pipes, moss crept in, and slowly, year by year, the soil began to reclaim it. By the 5th century, it had vanished beneath the earth. No violent end, no fire, no siege. Just the quiet burial that comes from forgetting. Today, the site is sealed once more. Protected from the elements, preserved for study. It rests in shadow, a sleeping monument to warmth, community, and mystery. Occasionally, a scholar will return to it, descend into its chamber with gloves and torchlight, brushing off the dust of centuries to read a single name carved in stone. And somewhere, beyond the walls of time, a figure in a wool tunic steps from the frigidarium into the steam and vanishes.
Now let us step back into the light.
In our final segment, we will turn our gaze from the silent stones of the past to the daily luxuries and rigid expectations of those who stood above it all. The Roman elite in Britain, their villas, their customs, their comforts and constraints. Life of a Roman elite in Britannia, let your mind now drift toward warmth and symmetry. Toward mosaic-tiled floors, soft lamplight flickering against polished bronze, and walls painted in deep red, ochre, and black. The scent of crushed herbs, olive oil, and distant wood smoke lingers in the air. You are standing inside a Roman villa, not in Rome, or even near the Mediterranean, but in the damp, green hills of western Britannia. Imagine yourself in the sandals of a Roman patrician, a provincial landowner stationed in Britain during the 2nd century CE. Not a senator, perhaps, but a wealthy man nonetheless. You live several days' journey from Lindinium, near a river that winds lazily through mist-covered farmland. Your estate includes more than just your home. There are outbuildings, workshops, and barracks for your household staff. Your status here is significant. You are Roman, in a land that is only half convinced it belongs to the empire. Your day begins not with alarm or urgency, but in measured routine. You rise with the soft light of dawn. Your bed is simple but elevated. A wooden frame with woven straps and a straw-stuffed mattress covered in woolen blankets. The villa is quiet in the mornings. Stone walls absorb the chill of the night, but the hypocaust system beneath the floors has already begun to warm the air. Your feet, when they touch the tile, do not sting with cold. A servant brings a basin of tepid water and a linen cloth for washing. It's no soap, but perfumed oil, perhaps scented with lavender or laurel. You rub it gently across your skin, then scrape it away with a curved metal strigil, leaving behind a thin sheen and a stronger scent. Breakfast is modest. Flatbread, cheese, and perhaps a small cup of watered wine or a porridge sweetened with honey. You eat alone, or in the company of your steward, who quietly outlines the matters of the day, disputes among tenant farmers. A delivery delayed by swollen rivers, a local magistrate seeking support. Your villa is built around an atrium, a central courtyard open to the sky, ringed with columns. Rainwater falls into a shallow basin below, and ivy climbs the interior walls. You walk the perimeter slowly, wrapped in a heavy woolen toga, pausing to check on a bust of your ancestor, which has grown dusty. Mid-morning is for affairs. You might receive visitors, merchants, minor officials, or petitioners. If you are literate, you might spend time reading or dictating letters. Roman administration is a world of scrolls, seals, and wax tablets. Your words, though calm, carry weight. A recommendation, a warning, even silence. All are forms of governance. At midday, you dine more fully. This is not a feast, but it is more leisurely. Stewed lentils, roasted duck or fish from a nearby stream, olives imported from Gaul, and fresh fruit when in season. You recline as you eat, propped on one elbow, the plate balanced carefully before you. Conversation is quiet, measured, perhaps touching on news from Rome or the recent unrest near Hadrian's Wall. You do not speak of local tribes in detail. To you, They are distant and undefined. The afternoon drifts gently toward leisure. On finer days, you walk the grounds, carefully maintained garden with gravel paths and trimmed laurel hedges. Statues of Venus, Mercury, or Mars nestled among the shrubs. A pond where birds gather. On colder or wetter days, you return to the baths. Smaller than a public facility, but private, clean, and predictable. The pattern is always the same: warm, hot, then cold. The body soothed, the mind allowed to quiet. By dusk, the sky outside turns a pale blue-gray. You change into heavier garments, perhaps a dyed tunic lined with fur, fastened at the shoulders with bronze clasps. A brazier is lit in the triclinium, the dining room where the evening meal is served, which is more elaborate than midday, though not ostentatious. A stew of barley and beans, spiced sausages, flatbread brushed with oil. Wine is warmed and mulled with herbs. You recline once more, a small group gathered on couches around the low table. Conversation wanders further now. Someone recites a line of Virgil. Someone else makes a quiet joke about a foolish Roman governor recalled in disgrace. You listen, but you do not laugh loudly. The warmth of the room encourages stillness. The soft clink of dishes being cleared blends into the low murmur of speech and the occasional pop of the brazier. After dinner, your steward brings a lamp and escorts you through the corridor toward your sleeping chamber. The villa grows quieter as you walk. Stone absorbs sound well. Shadows stretch long across the floor. You pass a fresco, a hunting scene, and nod toward it, as though acknowledging a memory. You retire early, not for lack of stamina, but because life here flows with the rhythms of sun and firelight. In your room, you remove your tunic, fold it neatly, and lower yourself onto your bed. Outside, rain has begun to fall. Gentle, persistent. It drums softly on the roof tiles above. The sheep, far from the villa, nestled together under a copse of trees. The villa, once alive with clatter and voices, has folded in upon itself, sealed by silence. You do not wonder about tomorrow. Tomorrow will be the same. And in that sameness, there is peace. You lie still, and sleep comes quietly. The castles whisper, a lullaby for the ages one. The stones remember castles stand today not as fortresses, but as hollow shells, their once impenetrable walls now porous with time. The lords and servants are dust, the battles forgotten. Yet if you press your palm to these ancient stones on a quiet afternoon, you might feel it. A faint vibration, not from the past, but from the stories still trapped inside. The cold that gnawed at bones now lives only in weather reports. The smells that choked throats have dissolved into museum placards. Even Eleanor's poisons, so carefully brewed, are now just curious footnotes in yellowed manuscripts. Time has a way of softening edges, of turning terror into trivia. 2. The paradox of safety. We modern souls sleep soundly in our climate-controlled homes, smug in our superiority. No chamber pots too empty, no assassins at the door. But ask yourself, are we truly safer, or have we just built newer, subtler castles? Our walls are digital, our moats, firewalls. Still have nobles, they just call themselves influencers now. And the servants? They deliver our meals through apps, their faces never seen. The castle never left. It simply evolved. 3. The final gift. Let this truth comfort you as sleep draws near. History's horrors make your bed feel softer. The past's discomforts make your pillow sweeter. The castle's shadows make your nightlight kinder. You are the lucky one, the one who gets to hear these tales from the safety of centuries. So close your eyes, dear listener. Let Eleanor's cunning and the servant's toil and the noble's folly swirl together into a lullaby of survival. It's the castle's last trick. It makes your ordinary, unremarkable, gloriously safe modern life feel like the miracle it is. Good night. Good night. Good.